Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Lots of signings going on around the NBA. We've talked all about the hardship exception and how many people are going to be signed to that. Well, we're starting to see those trickle in. Also seen a few more games postponed. So a lot of things to get to, and the return of famous Boston Celtic, Joe Johnson, back. Keith, I know you're so happy to have Joe Johnson back in green.
It's not that I'm unhappy
No.
to have Joe Johnson back in green, but I kind of am like, okay, why? Like that's I guess my thought. He hasn't played in the NBA in almost 4 years. He wasn't very good the last time he did play in the NBA. Really struggled, and the last time he tried to make a team, he couldn't run. So I'm not exactly sure, what people are thinking this is gonna accomplish. Now, I hope he does get some time, looks good, does his thing. As we always say, we want to see every player finish their career on their own way, the way they want to, versus being forced out of the game. But I mean, he's 40 years old. Like I don't know, that this is something to get excited about beyond. It's just kind of a fun story, and he gets to end his career full circle. I will say the Celtics never, ever, 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 ever should have traded Joe Johnson in the first place. That was a dumb trade when it happened. It never should have happened. And we can that's ancient history. We'll save that for an off-season show sometime where I'll rant about Rick Pitino years with the Celtics. But so Joe Johnson back in Boston. If this is how it ends, good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, from a narrative standpoint, like it's kind of fun in that regard. But I think what you're more thinking of is, well, now you're going to get fans, though, that are going to expect him to play and expect things to happen. And then they're going to be asking, well, why isn't he playing over, player X or whatever shouldn't be playing? And then you get to deal with that kind of stuff, right? Just like I deal with that stuff on the Lakers side of things. So that's kind of the not so fun part of it. But should he get in and make a shot or two and the crowd get excited and all that, like that will be a cool thing, right? So that's the upside to it. But again, the downside is people who are expecting things out of him will probably wind up being disappointed, and then they get upset, and then we get to deal with the comments.
Exactly, and that's more out of self-preservation. It's
Right.
And I realize this is first world problems. We cover
Absolutely.
the NBA for a living. It is 100% a dream job for both of us. This is just not like you just don't want to get yelled at all night long in dimensions about a bunch of foolishness and why are guys not playing and all these kind of things. So we'll just, if he gets in, as I said, it either means things went really, really well or really, really poorly. There's probably not going to be a point where it's a 5-point game with 2 minutes left and Joe Johnson's on the floor, unless we're really in trouble roster wise with the Celtics. Otherwise, you just keep things moving and going. As several teams, I had to chuckle a little bit when you said hardship signings continue to trickle in. I feel like it's more like they're coming via fire hose.
Yeah, it is.
Days. But yeah, it's definitely, we've had several of those. You want to run through the ones we have not covered as of yet?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, so a couple of these are from yesterday post recording, but we want to make sure we cover them here. Moses Wright to the LA Clippers. Big man, he was with the Clippers during the preseason, was playing in the G League. DJ Wilson, former first-round pick. He's going to catch on with the Toronto Raptors. We're going to talk more about the Raptors in a couple minutes. Manuel Mudiay to the Sacramento Kings, another former high first-round pick. He had been playing overseas. Charlie Brown. Not that one, not Charlie Brown Christmas. But he's going to join the Dallas Mavericks. Charlie Brown had been with the Hawks and the Thunder in the past couple of seasons. Wes Iwundu, he's going to join the Atlanta Hawks, a former Orlando Magic player. Also played with the Mavs and the Pelicans. Trey Scott with the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is one of the more kind of, I guess, call it pure call-ups. He was with their G League team, and now he's coming up to be with the Cavs as they're really going through with some COVID stuff, like several other teams are. Carlik Jones of the Dallas, he's going to join the Dallas Mavericks, another more pure call-up. We already talked about Joe Johnson, but another blast from the past, Brandon Knight.
That's
going to
right.
get another shot in the league. He was playing in the G League. He's also going to join the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas, among several players who are out for them due to COVID reasons. Luka Doncic, and that's tough because it sounded like he was going to play tomorrow for the Mavs and then be available on Christmas, and now highly unlikely neither one of those things is going to happen. Quindary Weatherspoon to the Golden State Warriors. He was with the Spurs on a two-way contract last year, and then with the Warriors in the preseason. And then Check Diallo, a big man who's kind of bounced around the league quite a bit over the last several years. He's going to join the Detroit Pistons. And I think that brings us back up to date. But since we hit record, there might have been another 7 or 8 that were reported that we just missed. But I don't think so.
At this point, yeah, that's probably correct. And I mentioned this before we came on air. We're seeing teams who are signing some players, like we mentioned with say Joe Johnson and players like that, where they're probably not getting on the court unless it's a blowout, unless it's garbage time. Right. A lot of these signings are going to be more just to adhere to the NBA's rule than anything else. And should there be some garbage time situation, then okay, maybe they wind up actually getting into the game. But most likely you're not going to see most of these players on the floor. Instead, teams will just shorten rotations rather than throw a guy out there that doesn't know their plays and things of that nature. Yeah. That said, I still hope we get at least 1 or 2 kind of Kurt Warner Christmas stories or whatever here that, the guy comes from out of nowhere and career gets revitalized. Next thing you know, the guy's got a spot.
Absolutely.
Still keep my fingers crossed for IT. Rough night last night for him, but for Isaiah Thomas, I think he's probably got the best shot out of any of these guys to really stick here.
Yeah. I think not see them play. There's a couple teams where some of these guys are absolutely going to play, like Orlando. We've already seen that. The Magic now have more available hardship players than they do regular roster players, which is just, that's ridiculous. Which also leads me into, okay, I'm going to do it, Trevor. I'm going to step up on my soapbox for a second here, just for a second. And shout out to, in our last video, I wish I could pull it up right now, but whoever put in the comments that I'm always so happy. I generally am a pretty positive person, and I love the game. I love what we get to do here so much. But right now, I'm a little cranky. One of the things I'm cranky about is, what are we doing with these postponements? They seem so haphazard.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to make sense. Orlando has more players out than they do have available, and more hardship players than regular players, yet they're having to play. Toronto, they did get their game canceled tonight against Chicago Bulls, Wednesday night when we're recording this. So that's part of that as well. But it is a little like, we're postponing some games. It just seems off. Something doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. Nets Trailblazers was also postponed tonight. I know a big part of it is these teams are getting day of positive tests. They're not able to get players there in time to fill out the roster to have enough guys to play. But it just does feel a little odd, especially with the Nets Trailblazers game. That's actually tomorrow night. I misspoke. It's a Thursday night game that was postponed. So we'll see, where this goes with these postponements, but they do just seem a little haphazard because like Orlando and Toronto, they're gonna have to play these games with mostly hardship players available versus regular rostered players. And I'll step down off the soapbox.
If Nets Blazers is tomorrow, shouldn't that game, if you're required now by league rule to sign a hardship player for every player that tests positive, shouldn't that game still be happening if you've got until tomorrow? I mean, you'd have to imagine there are players. I know travel and all that kind of stuff, but the league rules were structured to try to avoid postponing any more games, even if it meant games were being played by Shane Falco or whoever out there. So, so what's the rationale then?
They're on the West Coast right now.
Yeah.
Right. They're on the West Coast. They're in Portland for a game tomorrow night, which that's clearly not going to happen now. Most of the rest of these guys that are being called up are in Las Vegas. That's not that far of a trip. You should have been able, I would assume, by tomorrow, get somebody to bring them up to play, on Thursday night with, a full day's notice. I would have assumed you could have got there, but for whatever reason, we'll let the conspiracy theorists go wild in the comments if they want to about that. But what I do wonder now is what's going to change between now and Christmas for the Nets?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to play Christmas Day against the Lakers? One is, I almost kind of hope not, because that should have been one of the games of the year. And it is just, it's going to be junk, right? On both sides. We're missing a ton of guys. I'd rather see that game get postponed, made up when, we could, but we're running into a handful of these teams now have had multiple games postponed. And I said this on Twitter this morning. they're either going to have back-to-back-to-back games that they're going to have to play. The Nets, because they're getting West Coast games canceled or postponed, rather, are going to have to make trips back to the West Coast or fit teams in at some point in the another future West Coast trip. It's just going to be weird how these get played, and it's just going to be kind of messy, the way this looks. And what I think that will tend to lead to is if you're playing back-to-back-to-back games or you're having to do a weird travel, they're not going to play their main guys anyway, right? They're just
Yeah.
going to say, well, forget it, sit out these
Right.
guys anyway, and you're going to get the game you might have gotten anyway with a bunch of G League players or lesser players on the roster or whatever it is. So there it is. See, I'm not always positive. I can get cranky. Trevor knows. He sees me cranky occasionally.
Every once in a while. But you know what?
My years with Disney told me you leave that out of the public eye. You when you go out there with the guests, you put on a smile and you work. So I try to bring that to the show, but had to get up on the soapbox today about this one.
No, and you're right. It's a weird situation, and you probably are either way going to get a not the high quality game that you're hoping for. And the NBA is already bracing for some of these Christmas day games to be canceled because they've already said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to move things to the best time period we can. So if a game that was in the middle of the day gets canceled, we're going to take the morning game and we're going to move that into the middle of the day, right? They're going to do these things to shift things around. I would be surprised if we don't see any games. I shouldn't have used the word canceled, postponed. I'd be surprised if we don't see any Christmas Day games postponed. Obviously not the ideal situation for the NBA because this is their day, but that's kind of reality of the situation we're dealing with. And speaking of which, after we recorded yesterday, Adam Silver had that interview on ESPN, in which he basically said, a couple of things.
Correct.
Said, number one, that they don't plan to pause the season or anything like that, which we've talked about a bunch. And number two, that they are not going to allow asymptomatic players to play. And that's something that the NFL is looking at, is having asymptomatic players who are vaccinated continue to play. That's the path that they're not quite prepared to go down at this point.
Yeah. Now he did say that there can be further discussions on
Yes.
that, but it's yes.
So with all that being said, and the plan in place of forcing teams to bring in these hardship players so they don't have to postpone games, the hope was that we wouldn't see this happening still. And yet we're still seeing games having to be postponed because logistically replacing, in some cases, almost an entire team, it's just a tough thing to do.
And I fully get it if it was you're playing that same day and when you get up to do your morning tests, you have a whole bunch of positives. Yeah, that's insane to make teams sign guys, put them in without even so much as a walkthrough or anything. Like that's crazy. So I get it, but this is a day out. Like you would think, now if it comes out, the Nets had 4 more guys out because now they don't have to put out another report, injury report, because they're not going to play. But if that came out, all right, then it makes more sense, right? Because now it's like, how far are we taking this? But it is getting to the point where it's a little bit like, where are we going? Let's see, what this all looks like. But it's it is just getting a little crazy. Yeah. So to talk about that Adam Silver interview yesterday with ESPN with Malika Andrews. First, shout out Malika Andrews. Did a really good job in a tough spot. Asked some really tough questions, really kind of pushed, Adam Silver on some stuff. I thought that was really, really good. But as you said, main takeaway, no pause. Nobody wants it. It's also clear folks from the Players Association have also come out and said, yep, we're in agreement, keep moving forward.
Right.
Nobody wants to lose the revenue. That's the reality. He also said no bubble. That's not being discussed. We know that's not going to happen. There was also as we learned they're willing to talk and see what it looks like with the players. The asymptomatic players, what does that look like down the line? There's a lot of mixed thoughts on that. The NFL is going through that right now, where they've been kind of getting hammered on that a little bit from some of the health professionals. To be honest, I don't know enough about it, so I don't have a real opinion other than we know what the NBA's rule is, and we're going to go with that. So it's and then hit on just a couple other things. There's no thoughts of restricting attendance in buildings. They're going to
Mhm.
follow the local guidelines, whatever those are, and they'll run with those. We have seen now, I want to say we're up to 4 or 5 cities that have come out and said you have to be fully vaccinated to attend games,
Yeah.
or at least partially vaccinated. If you're not eligible, like some kids have only just recently become eligible in areas, so it's just going to be a you know something to continue to monitor and figure it out and see what it looks like as we go. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on and not all of it great, and it kind of is what it is.
I also saw there've been a lot of reports, the G League showcase. There's been that can often be sort of the breeding ground for trades, right? Because you get everybody in one place. I mean, just
Yep.
like in the summertime, right? We're all in Las Vegas, and there's a lot of discussion that takes place there. Sometimes you set up the groundwork for a trade later on. Because of what's happening right now, teams are spending so much time scrambling to find replacement players, hardship players to come in, that a lot of those trade discussions aren't
Yeah.
happening or aren't going very far because they're so busy going, oh my gosh, I suddenly have to sign 5 players. Who can we go get? And so there's this mad dash to do these things. So there might be a little bit of a trickle down effect here, where because front
Sure.
offices are having to spend more time on finding players to come in and replace guys who have tested positive, that might bleed into the trade deadline a little bit, where maybe we see less things get. I mean, it depends on how things progress from here, but we may see a quieter trade deadline because of this, because less conversations are taking place.
Yeah, and there's also the reality is beyond the okay, right now I got to get us through the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the I don't know if I can trade you 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 in a trade,
Right.
because I may need those guys,
Yeah.
in a couple weeks. So yeah, it definitely puts a little bit of a damper on that. It's kind of interesting. I had said on Twitter last night, like I kind of left it a little more vague, but I was like, come on, Pacers, like they got
Saw that.
destroyed by a 1/3 of the Heat's
Mm-hmm.
roster last night. I mean, in Miami's going through regular injuries. They also have some COVID absences, but I mean, it was really ridiculous. It was Kyle Lowry, I believe. Oh, then Duncan Robinson. Those were only 2 regular starters to play, and the only 2 regular rotation guys were Lowry, Robinson, and Tyler Hero. So it was, really a mess. They didn't have anything resembling forwards or even real wings with size. It was just one of those things where it's like, well, what happened here? And the Pacers got killed
And they had
with
their
most of
starters.
their roster. Yeah. Yeah, Malcolm Brogdon got hurt and had to leave the game, but
Yeah.
most of their roster, it's like, what are we doing here with this? So it really has become in a position where I look at this of uh, the Pacers. It's beyond it. I called them expired milk a while back on one of our shows. That milk now you're running
It's
the risk of needing to get a whole new fridge.
it's getting
It's gonna
chunky.
be so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's did you watch The Office?
Yes.
Dude,
Yeah. Yeah.
chunky lemon milk.
With Kevin. Yeah.
Yep, Kevin drinking Andy's milk. You're
Yep.
gone. I'm gonna miss you, chunky lemon milk.
Oh,
Yeah, the Pacers are chunky lemon milk right now. So
that's what they are.
Indiana chunky lemon milks. That's it until they start making some trades and freshen things up a little bit.
They definitely need to. They definitely need to. Let's see. So what is there anything else that we need to get into? Because I know we've talked about a lot of different things here. Oh, Reggie Jackson enters the
Yeah.
health and safety protocols. That'll be a
Yeah.
big deal for the Clippers. But again, I feel like so many of these, like the importance of it almost gets diminished because it's happening to everybody. So
Yeah.
it's hard to be, oh my gosh, Reggie Jackson is out. Like normally this would be a huge deal but everybody is getting hit by this right now. Even Luka being out, it's like Luka's out, but but Giannis is out, but James Harden is out. But it just feels like everybody's out right now.
Yeah, there was a point where I'm gonna see if I can find it. I tweeted it, but it was a while. It was a couple days. I mean, a while ago, but it was a couple days ago. There were only, I think, 10 teams at that point that didn't have a player in the health and safety protocols. It was Detroit, which now they do because they have Cade Cunningham. Houston, I think Houston's still clear. Indy, I believe, is clear. New Orleans, I'm not sure. I think they're clear. OKC, Phoenix, Portland, I believe, still clear. San Antonio, Utah, and then Washington, I think, is back to clear again. So we're down to 9 teams don't currently have a player in the health and safety protocol. So it's almost shorter to go through the list of teams that don't well, not almost, it is shorter than it is. This was interesting. Bobby Marks pulled this number together. I just think is just roster related and kind of interesting.
Mhm.
The prior 5 years, so starting with the 2016-17 season, there had been 35 total hardship contracts signed. As of now, this was yesterday, and I think it was like yesterday morning. It was 38. We're now up to, with the reported deal of Czech Diallo being the last one, 51 total hardship signings
Oh,
just this season alone. So my guess is by the time we get there, it'll be double. It'll be double what it was the prior 5 years. I haven't been able to track this number down and put the research into it that I need to, but it is, I think we're going to see a record number of players appear in an NBA game this
oh,
season is my
we would
guess.
have to. It has to.
Yeah.
It has to be. I can't imagine it going any other way. I think just given the circumstances, you would have to set a record with that this year. I do want to go over. There's some. So Brian Windhorst mentioned this the other day, recently on a podcast about De'Aaron Fox no longer being untouchable for the Sacramento Kings. What kind of an impact do you think that's going to have on the trade market? What's his trade value? And I know we instantly jumped to a Ben Simmons deal, but is that the path forward here for the Sacramento Kings? I know this has taken us in another direction, but I think it's interesting that now they're starting to back away from this. No, De'Aaron Fox is our guy, and we've seen Halliburton play pretty well with Fox out. I think that the writing may be on the wall now in Sacramento.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that factor in there, right? Tyrese Halliburton has looked great the last handful of games. He obviously had a very strong rookie year. I think we're starting to really see he is best when he's the lead car on ball quite a bit, and the offense runs through him. Davion Mitchell, obviously, is a first-round pick, is somebody that you want to see get more minutes. It's just hard to play three point guards together. You can play two quite a bit. You can really kind of make it work because Halliburton has good size for the position, and you can play all three good amount of minutes. But my guess is that's probably what's changed. I think ideally Halliburton becomes a 32 to 35 minute a game player, and then that's where you want to go. And then with Fox, that becomes a little superfluous, right? You don't necessarily need another point guard. So I think that's probably a big part of it is, well, what does that look like? Where he goes, this goes back to the discussion we've had a million
Who
times.
needs a point guard?
Needs a point guard.
Yeah, that's the
Now,
problem.
it's De'Aaron Fox, and he signed long term. That's a heck of a lot different than a $44 million John Wall,
Sure.
right? Or a very expensive guy who's not as good as De'Aaron Fox. So I think that is something that is really to factor in. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why a deal with Philly would make a lot of sense. Right, it fills a hole at point guard for Philly. I like Tyrese Maxey, but it's there, and then gives the Kings a guy in Ben Simmons. Maybe there's something there. De'Aaron Fox, one of the players on the mythical list of 30 or whatever it is that Philly would accept. We don't know. I hope someday somebody leaves that list on a whiteboard. Orlando Magic
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna go there with the whiteboard thing. That was so great, wasn't it? It was like their draft targets or something, or was it trade targets?
No, it was trade targets.
It was trade targets.
Trade targets, yeah. And the worst part was it was signing Patricio Garino to a late season contract is where the picture got taken. So yeah, that was not great with that one. So that was not good. So what's funny is I think that did make everybody like Twitter detectives though. Yeah. Whenever one of those signed pictures is signed, like what else is there? So yeah, it was kind of funny. But yeah, it's I do think it's something to think about at least. It definitely opens up the trade market. And if you're the Kings, you got to be able to get a pretty good return, either a Simmons type player or a really nice return package of players. If you can in a De'Aaron Fox trade, because he hasn't had a great year this year, but he's still pretty good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there'd be teams interested, but again, not many teams need a point guard. So I'm just curious if that's something that can wind up shaking things up on the market a little bit, though. For some of these guys to suddenly pop free, including a De'Aaron Fox, that might generate enough interest to then get some momentum going on some trades. Not that we should be expecting trades right now anyway. We do still have a little bit until the trade deadline. It's usually next month when those discussions start to really pick up.
Yeah.
By the way, if you guys don't know what we're talking about with the Orlando Magic whiteboard thing, just Google Orlando Magic whiteboard and you'll see what it'll be on there, and you'll know what we're talking about. It's a pretty funny moment in the NBA. Anyway,
funny for everybody, but
yes, funny for everybody else, not so funny for the Orlando Magic. All right. Yeah. I think we can wrap things up there. We got to bounce around a lot of different stories today, a lot of different things to get into. Obviously, all the health and safety protocols that kind of dominates the NBA news cycle right now. As we're seeing guys signed, we're seeing guys constantly pop up in health and safety protocols. It can be difficult to even keep up with because there's so much movement going on there. But trade discussions will continue to pick up. We'll see what happens Christmas Day. Ooh. Man, I just hope this stuff calms down sooner rather than later, but we will be right here breaking down everything for you. Please make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel if you're listening to the podcast version of this. Make sure you follow us over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody.
We are really close. Sorry, we're really close to 13,000 subscribers on YouTube. We'd love to, if you guys could give us a little Christmas, New Year's present and push us over the top. 13K would be really, really great to crack that number.
That's right. We are getting right there. We're just under a couple hundred away. Yep, almost there. So help us out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Give us a little present. We'd appreciate it.
All right, guys. Till next time, stay safe and see you.